My name is, welcome to, thank you to our sponsor. I had to say that. Thank you to our sponsors. I was at an event on Saturday, non-Microsoft, non-technical event. I was at an event on Saturday where one of the sponsors was Lyft. And the host said, "So who came here via Uber?" And then he was telling a story about, "Oh, I Ubered here." 3 times he said Uber when the sponsor was Lyft. So thank you. Hopefully I don't say any other sponsor. My name is Edwin Sarmiento. I used to be the guy who did the work, meaning I used to be the person who does a lot of the manual hands-on work that get things done, until I've come to a point where I keep doing this because I can't see you. I want to see you, and I feel like I can't see you. It's too bright. To a point where I've come to that stage where I'm the one telling people what to do, not because I want to tell people what to do, but because I've seen so many cases of what people like me, when I was at that stage, the kind of mistakes that I did, and then making sure that the engineers, the staff don't make those kinds of mistakes, because those are expensive mistakes. Contact information, my key area of expertise is high availability and disaster recovery. Why am I doing? Oh, thank you for the lights. Why the cloud? The cloud has been so popular these past couple of years to a point where I keep telling people, I'm old, that, why did I say that? I don't know, I just felt like saying it. One of the reasons I say that is because it's the evolution. It used to be mainframes, and then open systems to physical machines to virtual machines to private cloud to public cloud. Whatever's next is simply an iteration of what has happened before. Let me give you one piece of advice when it comes to your career. Nothing's really new. It's called marketing. Anyway, I'm not going to be a real estate agent, but let me just start off with a story where we recently sold our house. Anybody of you here had any experience moving to new houses, new apartments? Cool. But before I tell my story about that, what's your goal? Why did you come to this session and not the other sessions? What's your goal? Anybody? Yes? Come on. See my point of view about what's your goal other than seeing my point of view? Oh, I'm not a marketing guy, and I don't work for Microsoft, so I can say anything. Yes. Anybody else? See best practices. Fun fact, best practices are really not best practices. Anybody else? Best practices, point of view. What do you have right now? Okay. Okay. What are your challenges right now? Because I'm pretty sure you're here because other than the fact that you want my point of view, which is a valuable point of view, not because I'm smarter than you, but because I've seen so many of these cases, and it's great to learn best practices, but the lessons that we learn are from the worst case scenarios. There are powerful lessons from bad things that happen, like the most expensive bus ride I got from the airport to here. I'll leave that as a story for next time. Anybody else? Why you're here? Any reasons why you're here? Yes? Because I also want to set the expectation. Okay, I don't want you leaving here saying, that was a waste of my time. But I want you to get as much as you can because you came here, I value your time, and when you go back to work, these are things that you can use immediately. To my story. Recently sold a house. One of the biggest challenges for those of you who have sold your house, moved to an apartment, or this is one of the things that you have to do when you are either selling a house. We've been there for like 13 plus years. Sold a house, And in between, one of the things that we had to do was buy a ton of boxes, pick and choose, so we need to get rid of. Okay. Pro tip, if you have shoes you haven't used for 2 years, get rid of them. They stink. One of the things that we had to do was figure out what we need to bring with us, what we need to let go of, and there's this in-between. The in-between is the most challenging one because you can feel it in your body. Why? Because just, if you're not working out, you will be carrying heavy boxes, moving stuff around, right? We needed to hire a self-storage facility, and we needed to keep some of our stuff to the storage facility while we're looking for a home. Part of that is also making sure that we're not renting bigger facility than necessary. Like for instance, this room, if you could see, there are a few seats that are not occupied. So when you're renting a space, you have to make sure that you're maximizing the space, because renting a space is expensive. Okay? And we had to rent, by the way, this is not sponsored by U-Haul. We have to rent a moving truck. The truck that we had to rent depends on how much stuff we have, how many boxes we have, and how many times we have to go to and from our house to the facility. Not only that, from the facility to the new home. How many of you have had that experience? Again, moving houses, I'm pretty sure you can relate. For those of you who have not moved houses, good luck. When you do, your body is going to complain. Somebody's nodding. Yes. I've learned so much about migrating to the cloud from that experience. Although this is recent, but I've seen parallels between moving to the cloud from on-premises to me moving from my old house to the new house. I've given you some insights already, and there are lessons in there, and I've categorized them according to planning, considerations, tool strategies, and some resources. Let's talk about planning first. One of my favorite person in history, Winston Churchill. Those who plan do better than those who do not plan, even though they rarely stick to their plan. There's something about planning that would help you with anything, just about anything. And it's interesting because somebody mentioned, is it marketing? Is it all hype? I remember when Microsoft Azure used to be called Windows Azure, SQL Azure. This was 2008, 2009 timeframe, to now it's Azure SQL. Whether the name has changed so many times, it's still the same thing. Didn't I mention earlier, whatever, there's really nothing new under the sun, it's just marketing. And so you may have seen the slide where you got two major categories, platform as a service and then your infrastructure as a service. For those of you who have been doing private cloud implementations, this is no different from your infrastructure as a service. So your VMs, whether you're on VMware, anybody, a quick question though, how many of you here are still on VMware? Good luck. Okay, any plans on moving away from? Yes! I did an entire a whole year roadshow for VMware last year. 2 reasons. Number one, I wanted to know how the customers are feeling. It's like they've been cheated on, like in a dating setting. Like all of a sudden, Broadcom took over VMware, and now customers are left with nowhere to go, and they're expensive. And I feel your sentiment. I feel that. So infrastructure as a service on Azure is no different from your existing on-premises deployments. Private cloud, it's just on someone else's infrastructure. And then you have Azure SQL Database. These were what I call the OGs. They've been there ever since. Remember when I said about the SQL Azure? This was way, way, way back. It's evolution, what you now know as Azure SQL database, was formerly known as SQL Azure, and it's the same thing. They just made some improvements. Very recent is Azure SQL Managed Instance, and this is kind of like a hybrid of Azure SQL Database and Azure SQL Virtual Machines, which some of you here probably have heard of it. Yes, some of you may have good experiences. I was trying to be nice. I'm from Canada, I have to be nice. And part of that is also understand, and this is why I mentioned you have to set the expectations properly. Because not knowing the expectations, people jump into, hey, we need to do this because my CFO or my CTO played with somebody, they went on a golf tournament and they told me I want to go and move to Azure or AWS or whatever, okay? The way I look at this, and considerations-wise, because part of that planning is also understanding what you need to expect. One of the things that I think about is administration. Because here's the thing, regardless of all the hype about AI taking over our jobs, your jobs will evolve. You're still going to be doing administration, it's just a different kind of administration. So part of that is thinking about how am I going to look at this from an administration point of view. Stuff like logical control or physical control. I put asterisk in the physical control there because when you think about it, Azure, your platform as a service offering, whether regardless of public cloud infrastructures, are no different from, hey, I'm in a very large Fortune 100, Fortune 500, very large enterprise where the database administrator can only touch the database. That's it. Sysadmin takes care of the underlying operating system. The hardware takes care of the hardware. Virtualization admins take care of the VM platform. That's how I think of it. Unless you work in a company where you're everything, everywhere, all at once. Where you're the sysadmin, the developer, the CFO, the CIO, and you're... I wish I was kidding. I had a customer where the CEO was writing T-SQL code. He could not let go of his baby. He was supposed to be taking care of vision in company direction, but he's still writing T-SQL code. So physical control versus logical control, where I cannot really control much. So that's kind of how I look at that from an administration point of view. Why? Because if you are used to managing everything or in control of everything, there are some restrictions, and it's frustrating sometimes when you cannot do what you were supposed to do. And then there's cost. This is the only thing that your bosses look at. And they tell you, it's cheap, let's go to the cloud. Until they see their bill at the end of the year. Oh, by the way, make sure it's their credit card, not yours. Okay? Oops. So stuff like bandwidth, pricing, backup retention, additional IOPS, these are costs from the operational point of view. Is it cheaper? Remember what I said about renting a bigger storage facility when I don't really have that much? It is going to get expensive. It's cheaper in the beginning, but it is going to get expensive. Most people are locked into it's cheap. They don't look beyond. It's just like saying, oh, I'm going to wear this pair of shoes forever. It's like saying, I'm not going to grow old. I'm not going to grow big. The business will keep evolving. You will collect more data. So it is going to get expensive. And then on the infrastructure as a service side, you're looking at licensing, compute, and storage. Oh, by the way, not to mention, administration is a cost in case you want to work for free, which all of us want to do on a Saturday morning, right? This is the biggest driver as to why your boss's boss want to go to the cloud. They think it's cheap. No, it's not. It's cheap in the beginning until you start calculating the cost. And then you have your SLA. This is the one that I'm really concerned about because, again, my key area of expertise is high availability and disaster recovery. You are looking at, and we all love the nines, 99.995, Microsoft Azure will have all of these nines versus AWS and GCP and Rackspace. True, but nines come at a cost, literal cost. Some people would say, oh, I cannot build my virtual machine to 99.995. Yes, you can, but at the cost. So anybody who's promising you that it's cheap, they're probably not looking at the right numbers. Because we all love cheap, right? I love free. Your boss probably wants the free stuff that Microsoft is giving them away for 1 year worth of this free and this tier, okay? So when you start looking at all of those, when you're looking at compute storage resources, you're looking at the licensing costs, it adds up. And I want to set the stage right for the cost because this has been mostly the conversation around let's move to the cloud because it's cheap. No, it's not. Just saying. Okay? So which one? Our job as technology professionals is to guide a business as to making the right decision because most of the time, people at the top will force the decision down because they think, oh, it's cheap. Our job is to influence them, give them the right perspective and information so that we, together with the business, can make the right decision. You have two options. You got for new deployments, SaaS-based design, choose a platform as a service. For required tight control, use existing features. Who here was asking about whether or not this is a marketing session? I saw somebody ask if this was a marketing session. Okay. Fun fact, this slide is marketing. I did say I'm not a marketing guy, right? This is what you would see from a lot of the public cloud vendors. You do this if you're doing this, you do that if you're doing this. Here's my take on it. If you're migrating, I'm pretty sure they're not brand new implementations. They're probably as old as me, around 50-year-old systems where you got legacy code, where you don't even want to touch it because you think it's going to break. A lot of you are smiling because it's true. And the thing is, moving stuff around, especially, again, going back to that story of moving houses, when you have an antique and then somebody drops it, it's not an antique anymore. It's pieces of antique because it's broken. And it's the same thing. When you're migrating, I'm pretty sure that's not a brand new implementation. It's not SaaS-based design. So when it is we're going on migration, I'm pretty sure it's old. 100%. So you're either stuck with Azure virtual machines running SQL Server or Azure SQL Management. I'm being generous here. Because more often than not, you're going to be stuck with Azure virtual machines. And by the way, the reality is this. Microsoft would recommend lift and shift. Anybody of you here familiar with lift and shift? You're taking everything you have on premises, moving it to the cloud exactly as it looks like. Right? That's most of their recommendations. Why? Well, again, it's old. There's not much you can do about it other than to move it to the cloud. Ha! They got you. Because number one, we're lazy. We're not going to modernize that until we have to modernize that. Oh, by the way, this is the most expensive option. So all you did was to move your cost from on-premises to the cloud. Oh, yes, let's jump on the AI bandwagon. You know how much that cost? So you're now adding more to the cost. I'm not saying don't move to the cloud. I'm just saying think about not just the cost, but think about what else. If you're buying a new car, you think you're just buying a new car. And then the sales guy would say, oh, that Bluetooth feature on your car where you can start your car with your phone. You're going to love that. This is what's happening. All of these features are getting added into it when in the first place you don't necessarily need it. And then your cost starts from cheap to, oops, it's that expensive now. Wait, before I continue, anybody clear on that? Questions? Good. That was the marketing slide. My version of the marketing slide. I want to tell you the truth. because that's what you need to know. And I broke it down in several sections, if you may. You're looking at documentation, strategy, backup, and rollback. Yes, I included rollback. For those of you who are not thinking about rolling back stuff, God bless you. Here's what I know to be true about humans. We're humans. We make mistakes. And then, of course, testing. Huh? Testing on production, because we need to test production, right? What's the point of testing if it's not in production? Every migration and project, I kind of categorize or break it down into multiple sections, what I call the pre-migration phase, actual migration, post-migration, and the stabilized phase. Notice what I did was I broke it down, but the pre-migration phase is much bigger than most of them. Why? Because I want to put the time and effort into something before I cut the rope, move to production, and then all of a sudden realize, oops, I made a mistake. Because that's a very expensive mistake. Not to mention, when you're already running something in production, downtime is a thing. Even if you request for a maintenance window, just because it gets approved doesn't mean you can use up all the maintenance windows. Okay? We live in a day and age where we are driven by this. A 5-second downtime is annoying. We've created that expectation for our end users. That's why your actual migration should be as short as possible to make sure that it is up and running in an instant. So you spend so much time in the pre-migration and the stabilized phase. So you plan, you evaluate, you run proof of concept tests to a point where I'm good, we're ready to cut over. You put in a lot of the work in the pre-migration phase so that you can determine, am I moving forward or am I not moving forward based on this? And by the way, regardless of what your CFO, CEO, CIO, CTO, or whatever guy is up there, or whatever the board is saying, you are driving this, not them. If you hit a roadblock, you hit a problem, it is your responsibility to tell them even before you do step number 2. That make sense? Not their golf buddies. And whenever I do migration, I always have this mindset of what I call the PPT manifesto, not PowerPoint, but it stands for 3 things. P is the process, or what most Canadians would say, process. It's a properly defined process. Note that I'm not just looking at it from a database point of view, even though this topic is all about the databases or database migration, but it's more than that. You have to include everything. So there is a process. So the project migration timeline is a process. What do you do in the pre-migration phase? What do you do in the actual migration? What do you do when you're stabilizing? There is a process on every section of that. P stands for people. Oh, and by the way, it's not just you. These are the people that you don't know you need. Everybody loves the networking guys, do we? Whether you love them or not, they're part of this. So please, do them a favor, buy them a beer. With vinegar, if you want. Give them that, because you're going to need all the help you can get. The virtualization admins, you're going to need their help. The sysadmins, you're going to need their help. The application team, forget about them. You can start the conversation as early as possible. I've heard people say, oh, we did not include the networking team until we're about to cut over to production. Because they're going to dictate whether or not the traffic will go through the database after production cutover. The technology is the last piece. You might be surprised. Oh, wait a second, I'm a technology person. Shouldn't this be the focus? No. This is a small portion of a bigger goal. Because you will be convinced, coerced, manipulated into buying technology solutions that you don't need. Anybody here have licenses that they're not using? Love that. You already paid for that, but you're not using it. Somebody got sold. Oh, that Bluetooth feature on your car looks great when you start your car using your phone. That's the feature or the license that you're not using. So it's a small piece. You have to evaluate everything. Okay? I use what I call the PDA principle to drive the migration process. First is prioritize. I make it easy for people to remember. P is for prioritize. Identify and prioritize the workloads, because not all workloads are created the same. By the way, based on requirements, not based on what your CFO or CTO or CIO thinks. Because what they think is totally different from what you need. What Microsoft thinks you need is definitely different from what you need. Like I said, it is our responsibility as technical professionals to drive this. Okay? We may get recommendations, we may get best practices, but our business requirements come first. Like I said, not all workloads are created equal. How many of you here moved your dev test environments to the cloud? Dev test? Why did you move your dev test to the cloud? I love that response. Good question. Anybody else moved your dev test environments to the cloud? Pardon me? The response was, good question. Anybody else? Why move your workloads to the cloud or dev test?
Because that's how we're actually in production, and so we started using cloud from the lower environment.
And the reason I asked this question is because you want to test, and you don't want to be putting your production workloads immediately. I'm not saying don't. All I'm saying is do the work. Work has to be done. And in some cases, you may have to capture the workload from your dev test or production, replay them on your dev test, and see whether or not the cloud implementations or the cloud solutions would actually work for you. That makes sense? It's not like, let's move everything to the cloud, or let's move dev test to the cloud because it's cheaper there. No. Use that as an opportunity to learn and explore. Because again, it is our responsibility to drive the direction of the migration process. Okay? Again, big difference between dev, staging, production. There's also a big difference between RPO and RTO and SLA. Oh, let's do the whole stretched implementation between different regions. This is dev test. You don't need that yet. Unless, of course, that is what you're going to be doing for production and you want to test it. Remember what I said about us being lazy as humans? We implement something and then we forget. Next thing you know, it's costing you because you forgot that it's there. So you have to categorize your workload. Prioritize your workloads based on your requirements. D's for decide. You decide on the best solution and strategy. Best solution for you. Okay? What would be the best solution for you? You start with your requirements. You define your requirements and then you test. This is what I typically call the proof of concept testing. I'll choose this. These are my test cases. I will run the test cases based on the result of the test cases. I'll move forward whether or not this is what I need. If it's not what I need, I'll move to the next one, do it again. Now, of course, we don't have all the time in the world to do this. That's why you have to decide quickly. You will never have all the information that you need. You just need enough information for you to make a decision. Okay? And by the way, it should be based on the discovery of the previous phase. I've seen so many of my customers would move to the cloud and then tell me, oh, we chose this, when I asked, well, why? We just felt like choosing it. And then they wonder why it didn't work. It's not because the platform is not as useful as you think it is, but because you haven't done the work. The beauty with cloud, and this is one thing that a lot of technical professionals don't realize. One of the things I love about the cloud is it makes us start to think like business professionals. We don't like it, but the reality is now your workload has a cost. If it's on premises, we don't care. If a query is slow, I don't care. We got the hardware. When on the cloud, if you don't optimize, if you don't improve, and if you're lazy, it's going to cost you. It's a shared responsibility now. Some people blame the platform without realizing, oh, you haven't done your homework yet. Okay? So stuff like, am I moving to Azure VM or Azure SQL MI? And like I said, if you're moving old stuff from on-premises to the cloud, most of the time you will land on these two options. Majority of the time you'll be landing on an Azure VM. Why? It's old. All you're simply doing is doing a lift and shift. You try not to break anything because you want to keep it business as usual. And then you're thinking about, but oh, this is the only thing that your bosses care. You got to choose to do either an upgrade, a migration, or both. Okay? I've seen so many cases of moving from on-premises to the cloud, and they say, oh, we're going to migrate. Because you don't want to be moving to the cloud and realizing that you're still you're using an unsupported version of SQL Server. Remember the end of mainstream support for 2019? Or 2022, but I still see customers moving to 2019. So you have to consider that. Are you doing migration, or are you doing migration with upgrade? Because that's going to be part of your test cases. Whether you're moving all or some of your databases. Because sometimes you're keeping data in databases where it's all just logging. You want to move that to the cloud? Or do you want to refactor that and move it to other data platform that's not necessarily SQL Server? In-source versus outsource. Oh, this one's controversial. Are we going to hire people to do this for us? Do we have the bandwidth to do this? Do we have the expertise to do this? How many of you here have outsourced? What was your experience like? That? One word, it's tough. Which is true. Oh, by the way, they said moving to the cloud is cheap. They haven't really thought of the manpower involved in doing the work. So if you don't have internal people to do this and capable of doing this, oh, by the way, capable of doing this the right way, whose responsibilities is it going to be? Is it me? Is it a vendor? Right? And setting, oh, this is tough. Setting expectations. Because you now have to think about, if an issue happens before migration, we need to resolve it so we can move forward. Otherwise, there's no point in moving forward if you haven't resolved the issues. Oh, by the way, who's responsible for fixing those issues? Is it your team? Is it Microsoft? Who's responsible for that? And these are just some of the considerations, by the way. A is for act. You move towards the direction of your decisions. By the way, I did mention you're not going to get all the information that you need. You have to act fast. But you also need the right kind of information based on your testing, based on your data gathering. You want to do data-based decision-making or data-driven decision-making. And part of the testing is all collecting data. So part of that is defining your migration strategy. How am I moving to the cloud? How am I doing backup copy restore? Am I doing Azure Managed Instance Link? All of these strategies. But notice this is just a portion of that. Most of the considerations are people and processes. And then you're looking at implementing the solution. You decide this is what we're going to do. Oh, and by the way, before you cut over to the migration process, we are going to test it. Not in production. We are going to test it. Not in production. We are going to test it. I need to repeat that several times. Because, again, the outcome of that test will determine whether you want to move forward or not. And then you define the operational procedures. Most of the time, we're only concerned about, hey, the migration's done, we're over, we're happy, we're celebrating, we're going to get a beer. No, we're not done yet. I've come into so many customer environments where, oh, we're going to bring you in so you can do the work for us. Nope, because there's such a thing called business as usual. So you have to define the expectations on the operational procedures after cutting over to production. Who's taking care of it? Whose responsibility is it? Okay? And then implement monitoring. Because you need to monitor. It's funny because a lot of people, when they move to the cloud, they think, oh, the vendor is going to take care of that. No. You're still going to be taking care of that. It's just a different way of taking care of that. Part of it is implementing monitoring. And then training your staff. Because they are going to be taking over after production cutover. Any questions on these concepts so far? Questions, comments? Good? Notice I haven't really dug into the technical details yet. Again, as technical professionals, we are almost always getting ready to, give me what I need to do. Give me the technologies. That's just a small piece. You have all of these things to take care of before you even do the technical work. And of course, I forgot about issue resolution escalation. Some of the considerations. Number one, your apps. You're not migrating your databases and databases alone, right? You're going to be moving the apps. So if you're not in good terms with your application developer, I remember one of the first migration projects I did. This was back in 2016 timeframe. We were doing a lot of proof of concept testing, Azure SQL database, customer was happy, and then they did production cutover. 15 minutes in, they were complaining about performance issues. 15 minutes in. And I didn't even do anything, I only asked one question. Where's your app? The app stayed on premises, and it's connecting to... She's laughing because she knows exactly whose fault was it. They forgot to move the app, so the network latency is killing performance. Oh, by the way, they started cursing Microsoft. They're like, I thought you do that. No, don't blame Microsoft for that. Part of it is move. Then what is it? This is the reason why I said earlier, it's beyond just the database. Unfortunately, the database happens to be always the problem. I play what I call the defense attorney for the database because it's always the problem until proven innocent. I don't want to say default blame acceptor because that's kind of old school now. I like to call it, I'm the defense attorney for the database. It's always guilty until proven innocent. Part of that is really collecting all of these data to make sure that we are... By the way, nobody wants to be proven wrong, so you have to be nice. Oh, by the way, I'll give you an example. You can always say, I'm curious about the data that I'm seeing about the network latency. You're not telling the network admin that it's his fault. You're just showing him the data. Okay? So part of that is, if you're moving your databases to the cloud, are you moving the apps as well? How are they going to connect? There's a reason I started, if you're not in good terms with your network admins, buy them a beer. Because the way they segment the network, the way they configure the network security groups and the firewalls and all, that would determine whether or not your apps could connect to your databases. Regardless of whether they're on Azure VMs or Azure SQL Managed Instance, they have to be able to connect. How will they authenticate? Are they going to be using whatever you've been using on premises, whether that's Active Directory, SQL authentication, now Entra ID, single sign? How are your apps going to connect? Oh, by the way, have you implemented some form of tracking on how the connection is going to happen when it comes to authentication? Especially if you're in a regulated space like finance and healthcare. Anybody in finance? Highly regulated, where everything you do is tracked. Even going to the bathroom sometimes is tracked. How about application compatibility? Remember what I said. You have to consider, are you going to migrate? Or are you also going to upgrade as part of the migration? Okay. Here's the thing, though, and this is the beauty of the cloud, because you don't really have to worry about, whatever version's running. What you do have to worry about is app compatibility. Microsoft's taking care of the back end. Azure Managed Instance, they'll take care of the back end, they'll take care of the upgrade, but how is your application going to function? If your app is not going to function after you move to the cloud, you have bigger problems. Because your app developers are not going to rewrite everything. They're busy. Okay, so app compatibility is a huge thing. Now, again, as database professionals, we don't really think about it. That's an app problem. I'm more concerned about, I don't want to get blamed for when something isn't working. How will you monitor? Okay, because your on-premises monitoring solutions need to work. If they don't work, you got to put that into the pre-migration activity. Testing, making sure that you're capturing every metric that you've captured on premises. Otherwise, you're going to get screwed. Okay? How will you deal with backups? You know what's interesting? Computing has been around for what, 60, 70 plus years, and we're still talking about backups. A lot of people say, oh, the cloud provider will take care of that. I used to remember when, oh, the backup administrators will take care of that. I used to remember when they said they're going to take care of it. I also remembered when they didn't. We got weeks and weeks and weeks worth of backup that are completely useless. Okay? So how will you deal with backups? Because Azure Managed Instance is totally different when it comes to how you do your backups versus SQL Server on Azure VMs. Okay? Oh, there's no such thing as a 100% perfect solution. You will always have issues. How are you going to resolve and manage issues? Why is that? On premises, and this is now after COVID, where everybody's back to the office, or even if you're working from home, when an issue happens, a ticket is raised, and all you have to do sometimes is pick up the phone and call Jerry. I don't know why I thought of Jerry, but you can call them within a couple of minutes after creating the ticket. There is expectations on how fast they will. Oh, by the way, Jerry's not responding, I'll call his boss. Isn't that how we do it on premises? Right? What about the cloud? Call Microsoft.
I mentioned that we just that practice, so we know a bit earlier than the or we could display that customer. If you do practice, you get a chance to
So being proactive, right? Again, that's one of the reasons I spend so much time on having a defined process. But when issues happen, here's what I always tell people. It's really not about how fast or how slow. It's about expectation management. If you set the expectation it would take forever to respond to a ticket, the customers will actually move on and find another vendor. But at least you set the expectations. On premises, again, you raise somebody opens a ticket, you can pick up the phone, send a message on Slack, they would respond. If not, you will escalate to their boss. That's kind of like how we expect things to happen. When things are on the cloud, you call Microsoft. What's the expectation on the response time? There's a reason I'm moving my hand like this. Restart your browser. This is part of what we need to consider because issues will happen. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. But when those issues happen, whatever you did on premises no longer works sometimes on the cloud. Because if you're going to pick up your phone and call Microsoft, oh, by the way, how long are you going to be able to resolve those issues? Microsoft has really good people, but it's also a very large organization. So it's not just a matter of sending a Slack message and you're getting a response. It's responding based on the time zone, responding on the escalation. This is part of what you need to consider. And by the way, this is operational stuff. Okay? Your escalation procedures need to evolve. I've seen so many customers where they have been in the public cloud infrastructures for months and they have never reevaluated their operational procedures. And then they pick up the phone and forgot to update their contact information on who they're supposed to call. What about change management? If you're in control of the environment, somebody sends a request for a change, somebody approves it. Oh, by the way, under the cover, SQL Managed Instance is changing. They're introducing features, they're upgrading, they're updating, something is happening. Have you considered that in your change management process? Because again, in highly regulated industries where every single change is tracked, how do you capture that and tell the auditors this is what happened? Because you need to report those to your auditors. Okay? Oh, by the way, maintenance, because maintenance is also a thing. How do you deal with maintenance? Because different platforms will have different maintenance expectations. Okay? So setting that stage aside and setting the expectations aside should be a thing. Okay? Any questions so far on the expectations and considerations? Okay? The reason I did not spend so much time on the tools and the technologies because you have to consider all of those things first. We know for a fact you're moving to the cloud. We know for a fact you're going to be choosing between Azure SQL Managed Instance or Azure VMs with SQL Server. We already know that. But what we don't know is how we are going to do that if we don't consider all of those things yet. Tools. You got Map Toolkit, Azure Migrate. Of course, I'm starting to sound like a salesperson here. Anybody of you here use Azure Migrate before? Azure Migrate? Map Toolkit? Yes? No? Think of it this way. I've used Map Toolkit ever since I can remember. It's looking at your entire infrastructure, evaluating what do you have, what version, what edition, how many capacity, and if you run workloads, it will also evaluate what kind of compute storage resources that you're going to need onto your destination. Back then, Map Toolkit was simply used for license auditing. But I've used it for so many different things, part of which is data center migration. Azure Migrate is Azure's version of the Map Toolkit. Then you have Data Migration Assistant. I'm not going to talk about that much and then Azure Data Studio. I've been doing this for quite a while until Microsoft decided we are going to decommission Azure Data Studio. My favorite, DBA tools. Anybody you here using DBA tools? Yay! If you're not using DBA tools, please, please, please. Huh? You will save a lot of time, a lot of headache, a lot of manpower just by using DBA tools. Anyway, Azure Migrate. This is not just for SQL Server, by the way, and also one of the reasons why I mentioned you have to look beyond the database. You have to look at the application. Okay. I use Map Toolkit and Azure Migrate mostly for data center migrations, because I need to know what I need to work with, what kind of resources that I have, and then from there, use the information. The beauty of Azure Migrate is if you run it, capturing your workload, it will also make recommendations based on the compute resources, the storage resources that you're going to need when you move to the cloud. Instead of you doing the work of evaluating what compute, what storage resources that I need to achieve certain IOPS, certain throughput, certain CPU, it will do that for you. Okay? So it's, I should have included here a link on an article I wrote about Map Toolkit, because that should give you an idea initially, though. The beauty of Azure Migrate is you can download a VM template, and whether you're running on VMware or Hyper-V, run it there and start collecting information. Okay? Similar to that. DBA tools, backup DBA database. I'm trying to simplify as much as I can. Backup DBA database, restore DBA database, and start DBA migration. Again, if you're not using DBA tools, go for it. I've used it for a lot of database migration. Because remember what I said earlier? You don't want to move everything to the cloud. You pick and choose what databases, and based on that, you start creating a process that would get you to migrate what you need, just what you need. Okay? Resources. See what I did there? I spent so much time on 1 and 2, barely doing stuff on the 3 and 4, because I really want you to consider all of the non-technical things that you need to prepare for as part of your migration process. Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit, Data Migration Assistance, DBA Tools, and Azure Migrate. I am going to open up the floor for questions. By the way, let me backtrack a bit. Open up the floor for questions. Any questions so far? That tells me my time's up. Any questions so far? Was this helpful? Contact information, my email, LinkedIn. Should I call it Twitter or X? Question online. Yes, please.
What resources to choose to train teammates to gain familiarity with Azure Data Services?
What tools? There are available tools from Microsoft Learn. I would start off with that, because here's the thing. You need to be familiar with the tools and the technologies first. So Microsoft Learn has a ton of resources. They even have tracks for this. So data platform, look at the different data platform solutions that Microsoft has to offer. Look at those. That should get you started. And hopefully that answers the question. Any other question from the audience? All right, thank you so much for coming to the session. Enjoyed. Yes? Okay, one more question.
If the long-term costs of Azure are high, what key factors should be considered inside?
So if the cost of Azure is expensive overall, what are your options? Here's the thing, though. It's easy to spend someone else's money, especially if it's your boss's money. But our job as IT professionals is, for the longest time, technology has been seen as a cost center. Anything will be expensive. Oh, by the way, staying still is expensive. Just ask Blockbuster. For anybody of you here who are not familiar with Blockbuster, that used to be Netflix. They're gone. Don't look at it as a cost. Look at it as an investment. Because that's your business competitive advantage. So don't look at it as a cost. Look at it as an investment. Just make sure that you're not investing more than you need to. So part of that is exploring the tools, exploring the technologies, making quick decisions, just like with AI. Explore, learn, do some tests, and then decide. You don't want to be testing forever. You got to make decisions, act fast. Again, the PDA, prioritize, decide, and act. Hopefully that answers the question. Anybody else? Any other question?
DORA as a financial.
Oh, some of the regulations, the regulations, that's tricky. Every country will have a different regulation. Every industry will have regulations. That is part of your proof of concept testing. I remember when I was working as a data center engineer, we managed multiple data centers. We cannot move data around just because. We have a data center in Korea, we have a data center in China, we have a data center in Singapore, data center in North America. We just couldn't move data around because of those compliance and regulation requirements. So every customer, every industry is unique. That is part of the proof of concept testing. Okay? That is customer. I hope I set that expectation properly. This is a shared responsibility. It's not like, we'll move to the cloud, let Microsoft do it. No. It's a shared responsibility. And the customer, if you're a hosting provider, managed services provider, that's also part of what your customer needs to tell you. If they're not telling you, you ask them. Make sense? Thank you very much for attending my session. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Really appreciate you coming.